Ghost of Tsushima is an open-world samurai action game about the Isle of Tsushima during the Mongol invasion of 1274. The first part of this review will be about mechanics, and will have no explicit spoilers, though it may contain some visual and gameplay spoilers. The second part will be a story section with all spoilers, but as usual, the two will be timestamped so that you can skip the overt spoilers should you wish. I put 52 hours into Ghost of Tsushima, and over the course of that, I got the Platinum Trophy, got every ability, and collected just about everything. If you want a flat, would I recommend this game, then the short answer is yes, but the long answer is going to take a bit of time to unpack. We're going to tackle this one section at a time, so let's start with combat. Combat in Tsushima comes in three parts. Standard combat, where you have all of your tools and abilities, standoffs, where you have to time your attacks perfectly, and duels, where you have all of your hidden abilities, but none of your other tools. Combat can be quite challenging early on, as you have few abilities and are outnumbered in most engagements. Once you start to collect a few new moves, you will quickly find yourself clearing camps with ease, and by the end game, you are pretty much unstoppable. The enemies do more damage over the course of the game, but the sheer number of options you have to use against them means that you always have an answer to any threat they may bring against you. There's one tool that Tsushima has to balance this, and it is the camera. The camera of Tsushima turns to try and give you the most dynamic angle in the fight, and it often makes fights more cinematic as the camera swivels around to show the results of an attack. However, this also means the camera turns even after you turn it, and will turn without warning, hiding enemies off screen that will absolutely still attack you. It can swing behind buildings, trees, or rocks as well, suddenly rendering you unable to see the enemies surrounding you. When you combine this with the fact that the game doesn't have an active lock on, and instead soft locks you onto the enemy roughly in front of you, you often find yourself attacking air next to an enemy, or attacking a different enemy entirely than what you had planned. You have enough tools to get out of those bad situations, but the camera is never on your side. By the end of the game, you have kunai, sticky bombs, smoke bombs, oil, black powder bombs, fire arrows, explosive arrows, poison darts, hallucination darts, firecrackers, wind chimes, 5 combat stances, and hidden techniques. You have multiple armor sets that each have their own traits and abilities, as well as 6 charm slots that allow you to mix and match and build your ghost however you wish. This freedom allows you to approach combat pretty much however you want, and makes combat very enjoyable. The cycle of going from stealth and using the bow or any other tools to whittle down the enemy numbers before challenging the remaining enemies to a standoff and cutting them down so that you can duel their leader is just one way of doing things, as you are just as able to clear the camp quietly or abandon stealth altogether and boldly walk up to your foes, calling out for them to face you. Mongols rove Tsushima, from patrols running the roads to other Mongols delivering supplies to some capturing people and even some hunting boars and bears. Peppered in among these are side quests and interesting interactions that can award supplies or resources. You can collect these resources across Tsushima as well, and although you need quite a few of them to upgrade everything fully, by the end of the game I was capped out on many of them. None of these are required, but they can make for nice diversions around the tales and other open-world activities. Tsushima is a big place, and across the island are bamboo stands to cut, hot springs to bathe in, both fox shrines and platforming shrines to pray at, duels to win, haiku to make, pillars to honor, and lighthouses to set a fire to. These are fairly well spread out and are interesting side activities at first, but following a fox from his den to a shrine 49 times or bathing in the 18th hot spring goes from a fun detour to a checklist very quickly. There are too many of these same side activities, causing them to become just another thing to clear off the map. I will admit to having open world fatigue at this point, so your mileage may vary, but it got old for me very quickly. Character tales become this as well, with some characters having 9 of them. The stories themselves are solid, but because they unlock in chunks, you can go from having none of them to having 9 or 10 to do all at the same time. This and the many points of interest on the map hurt the pacing of the main story quite a bit. Video game pacing is hard to manage in a linear game because the players can take breaks or do side activities, but is even harder in open worlds, and Tsushima does not help that with a sudden deluge of tales that pop up from time to time. It doesn't help either that the mission structure of most of these tales are the same, with you meeting the character again, and then riding a short distance with them, fighting off some Mongols, and then them telling you to meet them somewhere else to repeat the process. There are a few notable exceptions, and those missions really shine, such as one where you arrive at the tail location and the Mongols are already attacking, or another where you have to stealth through an area killing only specific targets. Mission structure is fairly rigid despite all the options you have to tackle them. Mission areas can be far smaller than expected, and leaving the mission area either fails you or kills you. It feels strange for this vast open world to have such restrictive mission areas. Tailing missions will give you 15 seconds to find your target again, and missions where you ride alongside an ally will give you 15 seconds to go back to them. but combat missions just rain arrows down on you from every direction to kill you. This is repeated in the areas of overwhelming force you can find in various places of the map, where a story mission is going to take place and you aren't supposed to take out the outpost yet. I would unironically have preferred an invisible wall, as you can enter these areas, but the deck is greatly stacked against you. Respawning enemies who all know exactly where you are, and arrows from the heavens that are pinpoint accurate. The player's only warning is that it is in an area of overwhelming force, which can easily be read as a challenge, and the player has no way to know they cannot win. This is especially strange, as other outposts or cities in the game will just not have anyone inside so that you cannot do them before you were intended to do so. It just seems bizarre to make both of these choices when one punishes the player and the other does not. The soundtrack is really solid, with tracks that convey the weight of Jin's journey, the mystery of the island, and the tragedy of the invasion. Tracks like Honor to Ash and Sacrifice and Tradition hammer home those powerful moments. The Way of the Ghost and its vocal version by Claire Uchima is my absolute favorite, and this is a soundtrack that should not be missed. I have a few smaller nits to pick before we move into the story. I ran into a few bugs throughout my journey across Tsushima, some of which were just funny to see, and some of which were just annoying and required a reset to fix. I just found this fox den. There's no fox here. Normally they're waiting outside, and they'll jump up and down, let you know that they're here. I've tried running away and coming back. I've tried fast traveling away, fast traveling back. There's just no fox. I guess I'll find the shrine on my own if I can, because I want the 100% completion. I'm gonna try again. I've tried resetting checkpoint, thinking maybe that would fix it, but that didn't work either. Bugs are gonna happen, but this one stops my 100%, and I'm so close. I'm so close to 100%. I guess I'll find the shrine on my own. Oh, the fox never loaded in, but I found the shrine. But you can't honor it without the fox. It just keeps kicking you back out. Oh boy. Okay. There's also an area latent to the game called Mount Jogaku that requires you to traverse it quickly because of the cold, ice, and wind slowly overtaking your vision unless you stop at fires to warm up. None of your own fire-based abilities will help with this, and you have to take a preset path to get to the top, which led to me running around the mountain freezing to death a handful of times before I found the correct path. Haiku were used in many areas of the game and are interesting in their implementation, but haiku would not exist for almost 400 years after the events of the invasion of Tsushima. This did not shatter my immersion, but the knowledge did make me laugh just about any time I sat down to create a haiku. There are 4 standard combat stances in the game, and once you have a second one, the game will pause the next time you find an enemy is effective against and force you to switch to it. The next few fights, that enemy type will flash to remind you to switch, even if you aren't swinging at them or were trying to kill them with kunai. Finally, for my nitpicks, archers will call out to let their allies know that they are firing, so they can evade, which is a really clever way to let the player know the archer is about to fire. However, the archers will still do this when they are the last enemies alive, to warn the enemy that just killed all their friends that they are shooting at it. I understand this is for the sake of the player, but in a world that is very immersive, it feels very out of place. Now we shall move into the story section, and all spoilers. There will be a timestamp shown on screen that you can skip to if you just want my final thoughts. There are a handful of characters Jin meets and interacts with throughout his journey, and at first all of them are far more interesting than he is, as he comes off very bland, speaking only of his honor. Over time he does change, though because of the aforementioned pacing issues, it takes most of Acts 1 and 2 before he begins to feel like a character. After that point, Jin becomes a really interesting character, driven by rage and grief, willing to toss aside all that he was to protect the people of Tsushima. The game paints this as a bad thing, and from Shimura's perspective it is, but Jin makes his motives very clear. It almost feels like the game is asking, who is the real monster here? Koten Khan or Jin? But the answer is really clear, as Jin is not cutting off limbs and leaving people alive to torture them, or hanging people, or burning them alive inside their houses. This is especially clear once Jin starts to use poison. Lord Shimura is disgusted by the choice, as you would expect for him, but Koten Khan starts to do the same, and so do some of the people on the island, as the game tries to shame Jin for stooping to this level. But Jin did not invent poison, and I refuse to believe Khotan Khan would not use poison until his enemies did, since he has already proven to be ruthless. It could be argued that Khotun just did not know how to acquire some here, but the Mongols already were using poison arrows in their homeland from history, and surely he would have brought some with him. This also doesn't answer why the people of Tsushima only started using it after the ghost did. It could be argued Jin made it popular, but Yuriko cannot have been the only one that knew those flowers were poisonous. All of the side characters are good, but Taka, Gyuzo, and Norio stand out for me as examples of what the invasion has done to the people. Yuriko is the exception, but her story is very powerful, and the moment when she asks Jin, who she thinks is his father, what he sees, broke me. Gyuzo giving in to fear and desperation, while Norio and Taka rise to the occasion to fight, is a great dichotomy, as the fighter gave up, while the peaceful took up the fight. Norio fighting for his dead brother, and the parallels there with Jin fighting for the sake of the dead samurai is really solid, especially once you get the twist with Injo. Taka's is the one that affected me the most, as he was inspired by Jin, and wanted so badly to help the man who gave him courage that he fought to his last to save him. This is what really pushes Jin over the edge as well. Lord Shimura is the Jito, and he plays his part well. Unbending, unbroken, he makes for an interesting foil to the ghost, standing in direct opposition to all that Jin is becoming. His relationship with Jin is very well told throughout the game, and the moment they break apart is very affecting. There's one more character to discuss here, and that is your horse. There are 3 names you can choose for your horse, but I chose Nobu, and so for the rest of this review, he will be referred to as such. And in a reverse of my complaints on pacing, I think Nobu was strengthened by doing every single thing before doing story missions. At the end of every mission, you get a moment with Jin and Nobu, and you have to press a button to end the moment. These range from your horse nipping at Jin playfully, to Jin petting him, to even the two of you taking a nap together. Jin will even talk to Nobu. You spend a lot of time with Nobu in Act 1 and 2. This makes the moment where Nobu dies, getting you away from Lord Shimura's men, the single saddest moment in the game for me, as Jin tells him that he is sorry he couldn't protect him. You are then given another horse, but this one is skinny and lean. Unlike Nobu, this horse will flee from wild animals or skitter away from combat. He will pull his head away when Jin tries to pet him, and is easily spooked. None of these are big, powerful moments, but instead, using the world itself to sell you on the connection that Jin has with Nobu, even as you as the player connect with your faithful steed, makes it more impactful. When he is ripped from you, and you are given another horse that is not Nobu, it hurts. You are eventually given the chance to name the second horse as well, or to even take a different one. But by that point, I chose to remain with this lean horse and name him Kaze as my recompense for not being able to keep Nobu safe. Ghost of Tsushima has a really solid story that is stretched out to accommodate the open world. If you just mainline the story, you may have a harder time with fights, but the story's pacing will be more cohesive. But then you will miss out on all those little interactions that make some of the story moments hit harder. I truly think the island of Tsushima is just too big, and the vastness of the island drags down an otherwise really solid story and a fun combat system. The island is beautiful, and each area looks very different, but the things you were doing in those areas grew old quickly for me. I do think Tsushima is worth playing, but be aware of what you were getting into. If you love open world games, then Tsushima should be at the top of your list. But if open worlds are growing stale for you, this might be a game worth waiting on a sale for. I did enjoy a lot of my time with Tsushima, but if I was not playing it for review, I would have dropped it when I met Norio right before going to a story mission, after just doing side missions for 15 hours, only to be handed his 7 missions and Kinji's second mission. It's a very good open world game, but it is still very much an open world game.